Hello, ngHouston. So tonight we're like on location, which sounds really fancy because I've never done on location before. So we're at Angular Mix in Florida, and we're super excited. I was trying to get a conference room, but I did not plan ahead. So we're kind of all streaming in from our hotel rooms, and we have Maxim tonight talking about progressive web apps, which I'm pretty excited about. We booked this a while back, and I've been kind of excited. So I want to first, before I introduce anybody, I got to tell you guys that we are on conference Wi-Fi, and it's kind of crazy. So please be patient with us because our Wi-Fi is kind of in and out and not too great tonight. But I want to introduce the panel real quick, and then we'll get right into the presentation. So, Thomas, you want to say? You guys you should, if you don't know who Thomas Burleson is, you should know who Thomas Burleson is because he's kind of amazing. Thomas, you want to say hello?
Hi, everybody. I'm here at Angular Mix with Bonnie. We are doing 2 workshops. We did one today, or excuse me, Monday, right, Bonnie, with Angular Material Masterclass, and we're doing another one tomorrow with ngRx and Redux. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I was just about to introduce Rob, but Rob's video froze up, and I think he just dropped. So hopefully Rob will be back in a minute. And as you can tell from our flowers in the background, Rob and Thomas are in one building, and I'm in another. And then we have Maxim. And Maxim, I think Maxim video might have frozen up too. So we all have kind of
he's there.
patchy internet. Maxim, are you there?
Yes.
You're muted.
Yes. I hear
awesome.
you.
Well, I don't think they care if we drop connection as long as they can hear you, because you're the important one tonight. So I don't know if Rob's going to be able to come back and join us, but yeah. So you're going to talk about progressive web apps, and I actually met you a couple times at ngConf, and I think you're awesome, and you're also the organizer of ng Community. But I'll let you introduce yourself because
I have a separate slide to introduce myself.
All right. Go ahead. Well, if you're ready, then you can go ahead and share your screen and take it away. Oh, wait. Here's Rob.
And
Rob?
Maxim is also one of the trainers at ThoughtRam. And
is he?
Yeah, and
I did not know that. I'm going to have to start being nicer to you, Maxim.
And he helped out. He helped out flesh out the ideas and thoughts and reviews on the ngRx and the Redux course. And I actually think of Maxim as the prominent lead in my mind for the go-to guy for progressive web apps. Like if you want to know all the details on progressive, I always think of him as the leading expert now.
Well, that's what I was thinking. That's why I wanted somebody to come on and talk about progressive web apps, and I immediately thought about Maxim. But also, Maxim is super smart, and he's doing all cool stuff, but he's such a nice guy. So, yeah, Maxim's cool. And we have Rob. We kind of have Rob. I think Rob's here in spirit, but maybe not in Wi-Fi. So, yeah, so we'll go ahead and let you start your presentation, Maxim. And it's like the middle of the night over because you had to fly home yesterday. So you're jet lagged, and it's the middle of the night. So this should be fun.
Yeah, absolutely fine. As I told, I'm double jet lagged. So I was jet lagged a day ago when I traveled from Norway to States, and now I traveled back. I present from Oslo, Norway. So it's absolutely fine for me. It's 1:42 a.m. and I'm alive and I'm on air.
You're awesome. You're awesome. You're a trooper, Maxim. I hope you get a lot of sleep after this.
Let me try to share my screen.
All right.
Yes. So, do you see my title slide?
We do. Thank you.
Okay.
See it?
Hello, everyone. Aloha. It's my big pleasure to present at Angular Mix, and huge pleasure to present for you today, guys, folks. Thank you, Bonnie, for inviting me, and let's go. I'll introduce myself on the next slide, but meanwhile, let's set the question for today. How do we build fast, reliable Angular applications to make our customers happy and remain happy ourselves? There are some interesting options available. Let's go through them. My name is Maxim Salnikov. I live in Oslo, Norway, and I'm working on UIs from the future, or for the future, for the company called ForgeJog. On my spare time, I build in local web front-end community by organizing some meetups, Angular Oslo, PWA Oslo. Also, I'm the organizer of ngVikings Angular conference in Nordics. If you wish to chat with me about web technologies, developer communities, Angular, PWA, just ping me on Twitter, webmaxru. I'm always open for your questions. Just a couple of words about ngVikings. This year we were in Copenhagen, Denmark. Next year, we go to meet Finnish community, and this is community organized by Angular meetups from Nordic countries, and we love to travel as Vikings do. So March 1st, 2nd, Helsinki, Finland, mark your calendar. Call for papers is open at the moment, and we start ticket sales next week. This is our Twitter, super simple to remember, ngVikingsConf, just follow us. Back to our topic. Before we go into technical details, let's recall the concept of PWA. According to the current definition in Wikipedia, progressive web apps are just apps using latest browser APIs and trying to combine the best parts from two different universes, mobile native and web. There are 10 classical characteristics of PWA. Let's focus on the one that relates to actual programming or development the most. I mean connectivity independence and networking optimization at the same time. It's something totally new for the web, and it's something powered by Service Worker, the cornerstone of PWA and our main object to explore today. Let's have a look on what we can and what we can't use in a service worker. You may notice that everything on the left is asynchronous, promises or events based. So what could we implement using Service Worker API? We could get some functionality of our application available in offline, for example, starting the application in general, displaying previously cached data, or replaying network requests done offline after getting online. Even in online, we can optimize a lot of stuff by just using cached data. But networking is not all Service Worker can do. Also, it's responsible for getting push events and displaying notifications. Using Service Worker, we could organize cross-client communication. And by client, we mean a tab with our application loaded. In the nearest future, we could organize periodic task running and even respond to requests from other origins. Time to remind ourselves, how does it look? Your application, outer world, and our worker in between, intercepting requests and giving its own responses. Both app and Service Worker are living in the browser, in totally different context though. Code-wise, Service Worker is a regular JavaScript file. Good. What's the current support status? I have a bad and a good news. Bad. It's not in production for all major browsers yet, and this blank slide symbolizes it. And good news, these APIs are under active development if not in production yet. In short, Chrome and all Blink-based browsers are in the game for a long time, as well as Firefox. The level of expectations of Service Worker in Safari from developer community could be expressed by the number of likes and retweets of this recent tweet of mine. I don't have so many followers. Microsoft Edge, behind the flag this autumn. It's nice to have some time to try how our progressive web apps will work in Edge before this API will be available to everyone. Web front-end frameworks are also fine with PWAs. It's generated by default in Create React app command line interfaces. Other popular frameworks have flags or templates to generate PWA scaffolds. Cool, so definitely PWAs have a bright future. But we are here to check how do PWAs work with Angular framework, right? What is the relation? And I can say they perfectly match. We have many interesting opportunities here. For sure, we can write Service Worker ourselves. We have Angular Service Worker, or the native Service Worker, if you wish. and some other nice libraries. For example, SW Precache and its successor called Workbox. Okay, let's spend some minutes to try to create our own service worker. Just to understand, it makes sense to outsource at least the basic functionality. But before this, let me introduce PWA Slack community I manage. If you are interested in progressive web apps, if you want to keep yourself updated, if you wish to ask the questions and to share your knowledge and experience, you are very welcome. We are almost 800 developers at the moment, and we are waiting for you. We have the folks from major browsers, frameworks, libraries. Back to our manually written service worker. What will it take to set up a simple application shell? App shell is the minimal set of files required for your application to start and display some meaningful parts of UI. For example, like on my draft, header with application title, menu, and some placeholders for the content. And by the way, having these placeholders is a better practice than having just a loading indicator. So what could we do with all these assets? Right, put them all into the cache, a special one operated by Cache API, so do not mess it with a regular HTTP cache. Service worker is an event-driven worker, so we go for install event to cache our assets and activate event to delete a previous version, if any. Sounds simple, right? But only in ideal world. In the real world, we have to deal with opaque responses from non-course enabled origins. We need a special way to cache them. Same for redirected requests. We need to clean the response in order to serve it later. In most cases, we update only some assets of our app. So creating a new cache and removing the old one fully is just a waste of resources. Cache size is large, but limited. We have to keep in control on it. And understanding of what was updated and what can be served from cache is one of the two hard problems in computer science, as we know, and many other things to care about. So if something goes wrong at this stage, in the best case, our service worker will not be registered. In worst case, our app will stop working even for online users. Okay, it was about just putting something into cache, right? Let's check what's next. Next, we have to serve these files from the cache using service worker again, instead of going to the network. This way, we have our application up and running in offline mode, plus avoid some network requests in online mode. We are going to use fetch event, and here is our very naive logic. Let's add the runtime caching. It's a top block of this code. So then we could have two strategies. One for APIs. Let's try to fetch the fresh data from network each time. And the second strategy, bottom block of the code, like conservative one, cache first. Let's try to grab resources from cache first. This is really only a big picture. And again, in the real world, if we decide to code it ourselves, we have to provide all kind of fallbacks, like if resource is not on network, if resource is not in cache, if there is no asset at all, what to do? And next, in addition to simplest network first and cache first strategies, we could provide something more interesting, like stale while revalidate one. Definitely, we would like to have something like routing, not to create this bunch of ifs every time. And we wish to have real full control on what to cache, how to cache, and how to get from cache, right? And many other things that possibly we have to code manually. So the main benefit of our manual service worker is great flexibility. It's maximal flexibility, I'd say. But what does come with great flexibility? Right, great responsibility. This is why it really makes sense to go for some helpers. What could we achieve by using a proper, I emphasize this, helper? We write less utility code, which is error-prone quite often. Developers of the tools we trust follow all spec updates and update the code accordingly. And I'd say that specifications around PWAs are live, so this is really important. They handle the edge cases we couldn't even imagine. Definitely, looking at the code, we could find some points for our own inspiration, and sometimes it's anti-inspiration, right? But this is open source, just send a pull request. Eventually, it gives us the privilege to focus on our task, which is most likely not a writing of another super performant cache invalidation algorithm. One of these helpers is Angular Service Worker, the package from Angular team. Most likely, you've seen some videos or articles about Angular Service Worker package, which is beta 16. Just in short, you install this package, you set service worker flag equals true in Angular CLI JSON by this command or just manually. Then you provide some configuration in file called ngSW manifest, and each root node of this configuration is a corresponding plugin of Angular Service Worker. And for example, configuration for static plugin is auto-generated by Angular CLI, and the rest we have to write manually. So this is a kind of JSON-based configuration, almost codeless, right? Then we run this ng build in production mode, and Angular CLI plus Angular Service Worker do all the job for us. Works fine, it's still there, but it's outdated. And today, let me introduce a new way to work with Angular Service Worker. So it's new Angular Service Worker. Version is now the same as version of Angular Core, 5 release candidate 1 at the moment. We install it almost the same way, just using next after the package name. And let me introduce the key differences from beta 16. First, no integration with Angular CLI yet, but it's shipped with its own mini CLI. Next, settings file for Service Worker itself and the one we create are separated more explicitly now. Actually, we write our own JSON file with any name. We will call it Service Worker configuration file, and build the one for Service Worker named ngSW JSON using Service Worker CLI. And we will call this a control file. And I find this update very useful because in current version, in this beta 16, there is a constant confusion with ngSW manifest JSON versus manifest of our web application. So like two manifests playing totally different roles, so easy to mess up. And last, there is no plugins concept, and at the moment it's non-clear how to extend the functionality, so it's something under consideration. Okay, as I mentioned, Angular Service Worker has its own CLI at the moment, which and the main task of this CLI is create control file based on configuration file. It has super simple syntax, ngSW config. We specify output folder where to put this control file. We specify the source, which is a configuration file, and optionally we could specify base href. If we skip it, it will be just a root folder, like for most of applications. At the moment, we could run it like this, so directly from Node modules folder. In most cases, the command will look something like this. So we render the control file to dist folder, where our application and where Angular service worker will be placed, and we have our configuration in file named like this. So this is just an example. What exactly could we specify in this configuration file? Just only basic settings. Index. Actually, this is path to our index HTML where to redirect all navigation requests. Asset groups, named groups of explicitly known at build time resources to be cached. The most natural application of this setting is specifying the application shell resources. And data groups, named groups of resources to be cached during runtime or on demand, when we have to apply one of caching strategies. The best example here is API calls. Let's have a look what we have in this asset groups. It's actually build time resources. What we specify here, name, the name of the group. This will be a part of cache API storage name. Install mode determines when the resources in the group will be fetched and cached. There are two possible options, prefetch and lazy. Prefetch, all resources are downloaded when the service worker is setting up caching for this application version. This mode should be used for all the assets required for bootstrapping the application. So actually this is application shell. And lazy, each resource is cached individually when it's requested. Same two options, prefetch and lazy, for update mode, and works the same. Let's have a closer look on resources setting. How do we specify resources for these asset groups? So this is an explicit list of resources to cache and three main ways to set them up. Files, a list of globes matched against files in configured distribution directory. These files will have their contents hashed, and the hashes will be included in the resulting ngSW.json, which is a control file, in a special hash table node for accurate versioning. Next, versioning files. Same, but for the files which already include a hash in their name. In case of default production Angular 5 build, these are HTML, JavaScript, CSS files. There is just no need to calculate hash because these files have different names if changed, so service worker flow could be simplified. And after all, URLs, a list of external URLs, relative or absolute path, that should be cached. These are often URLs to content delivery networks or other external resources. For example, the URL of Google Font APIs, like on your screens. Please note, using third-party external URLs is far not best practice for application shell implementation. It's much better to have full control on pre-cached resources. Now we jump to runtime resources, which are data groups. URLs, the same as in asset groups, list of globe patterns which match the URLs of requests. And cache config, settings for defining the caching strategy and fine-tuning this process. Strategy, two main options, freshness versus performance. Basically, network first versus cache first strategies. Max size, maximum number of responses cached per each group. Max age, to specify how long the cached response is valid, could be set as number of seconds, minutes, hours, or days, like 30M, like 2H, like 1D. And timeout, response waiting time after which there will be a fallback to cache. Same time unit as max age, and obviously it makes sense only for this freshness strategy. In my example, I use break-in use URL of our API as a good example when it makes sense to check the network each time before serving data to user. Another example of different strategy called performance. I go for URL with archive string in it, and this is cache first. So most likely we could pre-cache all data and sort it from cache, because probably our archive will not change. So performance strategy is fine for this type of URLs. Now, despite it's not for us, but for Angular service worker, let's have a look at resulting control file. It's still pretty readable, which is good for us developers to have a better control. And you see it looks approximately the same like our configuration file, with just one important add-on, which is hash table. So for all resources we specified via files node, it just calculates the hashes for versioning. So how to organize this build, how to make this control file from configuration file. Let's just go step by step. And we can create an npm script to automate this. So first, simple. We have to run ng build -- prod. Next, we have to generate this file using ngSW CLI. And last but not least, we don't have to forget to copy actual Angular service worker file from its distribution package, which is in Node modules, to our dist folder. And the Angular service worker itself, this is file called ngSW-worker. So this is something that shipped with this service worker package. So we could easily optimize, automate this by this npm script. So line by line, ng build prod. Okay, it's step number one. Then we use ngSW config, this CLI. We generate control file. And last command is just copying of ngSW worker to our dist directory. Now, so is that all? No. Now we have a service worker and the configuration file ready, but our application doesn't know about all this stuff. This is why we have to go and register a service worker. We are free to choose any of available options to do it. For example, we could just go classic.
I think we lost him.
I think you're right. I thought it was my internet, because my internet has been really bad. But he said if we lose him, we should just wait a minute. So we should just I think we should sing for a minute until he gets back.
Here's a question: when they're calling ngSW config dist and all that, that's generating a new config every single time, right?
I believe so.
What it seems like, yeah.
So I thought we were supposed to customize that file. That's where I'm confused, right?
Yeah. So
whose phone is it? Somebody just have a phone ringing?
Oh, someone's was trying to call me.
Oh. Do you need to get that, or we'll just? Sorry, guys. Thomas is on a live stream right now. He can't come to the phone. Call him back.
So
I honestly,
that's a question I'm asking.
I hope he comes back, because I'm still kind of a beginner with progressive web apps, so I'm still learning this. So we have a couple people watching online, so if anybody online knows, there's 10 people watching online. So if y'all know, chime in the chat and tell us.
If you guys have been to machinelabs.ai, I believe they're using service workers and a progressive web app approach, because their application loads lightning fast after the first time.
Yeah, that's the thing, especially when now, right, we're at a conference and our internet is not good. So it's really, because I find I'm doing it myself, because I'm trying to do something, and if it doesn't load right away, I get impatient and I'm just like, forget it. So yeah, it's
you impatient? No.
Yeah, I want it now. There's that GIF. What is it? Somebody I can't remember. Stephen Colbert, and he's like, "Give it to me now." I want it. So I just saw Maxim come back. So so I think there's hope.
I'm here, so I hope I was here not for I was offline not for so long, right?
We lost you.
Yeah,
Maxim,
we kept him entertained for a minute. It's okay. But Thomas had a quick question, if that's okay,
yes.
Maxim.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
So back at your slide where you were talking about the npm script, or excuse me, the bash script.
Yes.
So everything's making sense so far, except for one thing. You showed us how we could customize that JSON file, right? We had to sort of hand put things in, and then you said, well, we run this bash script to regenerate it all the time. So when is the process that we actually put in our custom information in there?
We have two separate files. Configuration files we write ourselves, and control files. And the goal of NGSW CLI is to create this control file. So control file is something for Angular Service Worker. It's not for us.
Okay.
It's.
Thank you.
Yes. So let me continue then. Service worker module share. So I believe I stopped somewhere here, right?
You were at the bash script.
Yep. So here.
Yes, sir.
What we have now? We have now service worker files file copied to our dist folder, and we have this control file ready for Angular Service Worker. Next, we have to tell our application, please use this service worker or register this service worker. And we have some options how to do this. First, we can go very regular and classic way and add service worker registration script, anyone, to our index HTML. Or we can go more Angular way and use the same code after Bootstrap module in our main.ts file. But I recommend you to go Angular Service Worker way. There is a special method called register in Service Worker module, and the code will look like this. So it's just 100% Angular way of doing stuff, right? We import Service Worker module from the same package, and in our imports, we just go for this register method where we pass the name of our Angular Service Worker, this file which we just copy from the distribution package. And then this is not live demo, these are just screenshots. So even for this quite simple configuration, app shell, and a couple of runtime groups, we will see this picture. So many cache storage created for us. Some of them are for caching the content, and some of them to store some metadata about this. And this one is for runtime. So we just outsourced this functionality about creating app shell and about runtime caching. So it's like quite complex algorithms here, but they work fine. And as a result, we have offline experience. So this is animated GIF. So we have something in cache, then we go to offline mode, we hit refresh, and application still working. This was our main goal for having this Angular Service Worker. Again, pros and cons. Main features are codeless, so we do everything by just providing some configuration. And if we go for some coding, we do it in Angular way, which we're used to. Unfortunately, it's a bit too experimental at the moment. There are some, serious bugs that don't allow to go for production with this option yet. And another like architectural issue is if we go for Angular Service Worker, it's intended to be a main player in our service in our progressive web apps. So we cannot write our own service worker and extend it with some functionality, like we will see in the next section. On the roadmap, definitely integration with Angular CLI will return in its best view, I'd say. Also, it will be possible to organize not just caching of application shell files, but caching of pre-rendered on server file on server side files. Actually, now separate pieces of this flow are already in place, but not glued together yet. And after all, this all will cause making Angular web applications progressive by default, like in Create React App CLI. Just the latest information on how this integration with Angular CLI could look like. We'll have a separate flag called service worker when we create a new application. What will be done? It will generate this configuration file with some smart defaults, and we'll use this register method in our app module file, which we just have seen. And then on production build, everything we have in this my example of npm script will be done automatically. So it will build an application, it will generate control file from configuration file and copy actual service worker. So we will not need even this small automation. It's all about Angular Service Worker, and we go for the next option, which is Workbox. This is a library developed by Googlers, same folks who created very famous, and I'd say it's industry standard library called SW Precache. So I believe now it's the most popular option to generate service workers. It's already has quite rich functionality, starting from classics like creating an app shell and runtime caching, plus some really cool features like one line to organize offline Google Analytics. And it also goes with its own CLI. So it's pretty common for modern front-end libraries to have own command line interface. So we install this, and in our application folder, we can run command something like this: Workbox generate SW. And yeah, it's important to mention that Workbox works with any frameworks or just vanilla JS application, so it's framework agnostic. Let's go through some basic functionality of Workbox. So how do we create application shell? Super easy with the command I just showcased. This Workbox generate SW. So what will happen after you run this command? You will see some nice dialogues exposed by CLI with questions about file types and location and about name for your service worker. After all, it will offer you to save your settings in a special file. And if you do this, you will see something like this. So Workbox, CLI config, and some basic settings. Just information about your app, what to cache, and how to name your service worker. In my example, I call this SW default JS because this is very default service worker created by Workbox. As a result, if we If after this comment we go to dist folder, we will see some new files. SW default.js, it's this auto-generated service worker, and file named like Workbox SW production version number JS, which is Workbox high-level library, something that exposes useful methods. So let's have a look what this SW default looks like. As simple as this. So first, import of this Workbox library itself, okay, and then based on our settings we just specified for this CLI, it generates the list of all files plus their hashes, which also work as revisions. And finally, it's instantiating of Workbox object and calling precache method with this array of files. As a result, we also will get all the routing rules set up for all these files in file manifest. Next, we ready to ask our browser to use this auto-generated SW default.js as a service worker for our application. And again, some options are available. We can register it in index.html or go for Angular ways. So since we are talking about a connection of Angular and Workbox, why not go for this? In our main TS file, we have a bootstrap module, and it really makes sense to register service worker after our application was bootstrapped. Why? Because the best practice in service worker registration is simple. The later, the better. For service worker not to compete with the main thread for bandwidth and processor time and for memory. So this way we save precious milliseconds of first time load for our customers. Awesome. So what we'll see in our application after we serve this, something like this. Again, Workbox created cache for us and put proper resources. It registered SW default as service workers thanks to this script in main TS, and application is working offline. So it means that we have to do nothing except this one-time generation of SW.js using Workbox CLI. Will this work for all applications? Like yes and no. Yes, it's fine for simplest PWA cases where we need only an app shell and all assets available during the build time. Then we can fully rely on this 100% auto-generated service worker, which again intended to be the main player in our PWA. And no, for the rest of cases, even in our simplest application, we already need something more, like caching resources in runtime. And service worker could be really different for different projects. So definitely it makes sense to have a way to create our own main service worker and extend it by some features of Workbox library. So in contrary to SW precache and to Angular service worker, it's possible in Workbox. Let's go for this option and create our own service worker. We'll need to install some more packages, Workbox SW itself and build. You'll see in a second why we need this. Next, in our Angular CLI, we just have to set up copying of this Workbox library file. Then we can write our service worker. I called it my service worker JS just to emphasize that this is something written by us, and it starts exactly the same like this auto-generated one, right? So we import the same library, Workbox SW, and call the same precache method. with one difference. There is no array of files passed, right? We definitely don't want to create this list of files and calculate hashes. How can we achieve this in a second? But now it's important for us that in the same service worker we could add more logic and use, for example, some runtime features of Workbox. In my example, I defined network first strategy for my routes, including API string. So after all, how do we inject this list of files in our service worker? Using using Workbox build package. So basically what we do, we take this file, we process this file with a simple node script, and we get a resulting service worker with the proper array of resources. And we do it like this. So I created one more script for Node.js. It will be a part of our build process. So we use Workbox build package, and the settings are exactly the same, like the ones for Workbox CLI. We say which files to pre-cache and like source and destination. So basically what this file does, it takes our service worker and injects a list of files into this pre-cache method. Okay, if we need a bit more customization, so as I mentioned, we are free to implement our own logic or take some features of Workbox like family of libraries, right? So what will it take for us to implement background synchronization? In just a couple of words, what is it? Just imagine that we have a web Twitter application, a good classic example, and our user is offline, but the form with tweet and button post this tweet is still available. Why? Because we can replay these requests after user will get online. And what's really cool, it will be done automatically. So no coding required. We just have to specify like basically the route of API with which we wish to be replayed. So how to set this up? We need to install more specific parts of Workbox. So basically this Workbox SW, it contains everything, but now we have to like handpick some parts of Workbox. We have to import these parts in our service worker. Don't forget to copy these files from node modules to our dist folder. The easiest way and the Angular way is to put them into assets of Angular CLI JSON. And now we need to go a bit deeper in our service worker. Now just follow me. So we have to specify a Q plugin of background sync Workbox library. Next, we have to set this plugin as a request wrapper for runtime caching. Next, we have to define this wrapper for one of our strategies. In my case, this is network only. Next, we have to register this strategy to one of the routes of us. For example, like something like /post tweet. Next, we have to register this route for our router. And after all, we have to instantiate Workbox SW itself. Looks a bit complex, right? Like Matryoshka or Babushka. wrapped and wrapped and wrapped and wrapped. But believe me, code-wise, it's super simple. So basically, it's more configuration again than just than coding. So it's really hard to make some mistakes here. As a result, what will we have? Like this. So now we are in online mode, and we try to post some tweets. Okay, it works. It was posted. Now we go to deep offline. We switch off Wi-Fi and test offline. Click post. Yes, some red lines. This is normal. Now we turn Wi-Fi on. Just a couple of seconds. And voila, our tweets go to server.
That's
without
cool.
Without like any movement from our side. Okay, summarize. Benefits. We can go for our own service worker, and this is really a killer feature. So I don't know any other libraries with this possibility. It's already quite feature rich. On the other hand, we need some build steps added to our flow, but they are not complex. And definitely, it could be more developer friendly. What do I mean by this? For example, I don't like this idea to have version names in versions in file names. So we have to manage this, what we import. So we have to keep track on is it version 2.0.0 or 2.0.1. Also, there is a bit strange way to turn on and off logging. Actually, if we import Workbox, one of Workbox files with prod in their name, it will turn login off. If we import with def, it will turn login on. Definitely we need some switch instead of this way, but it's all be fixed in the next version, which is Workbox, which will be Workbox 3. So now version in production is Workbox 2. So let's summarize. If you need flexibility, if you need full level of automation, and what's more important, stability for your progressive web app, like here and now, today or yesterday, definitely I'd recommend you to go for Workbox. And follow news about Angular Service Worker. I hope really soon it will be production ready, and we will use really native Angular way to create our progressive web applications. This is all from my presentation. I'm open for your questions.
So Maxim, have you thought about using schematics to extend the Angular CLI to automate some of the Workbox integration?
It would be a really great idea, but for now it's more than enough to use features of Angular CLI that already exposed. Like so, basically, this is just copying of some files. Mm-hmm. And yeah, maybe By the way, really good idea. Instead of this separate Node.js script for building, we could yes, we could introduce something in schematics. Good idea.
Correct. Because then you could automate the copying of those files and the generations and all that.
Yeah.
So I had a question about you were talking about with NGSW. It doesn't sound like there's nearly the level of configuration that there is for Workbox for doing things other than the static build time known list of files. Is that did I hear that right, or is there more configuration or more capability there that we didn't talk about?
For now, this is the current version, which is like work in progress, is only about static caching, about runtime caching, sending push notifications, which broken in current versions in RC1. Hopefully, it will be fixed in RC2. And some methods exposed to communicate between service worker and our application. So for now, the functionality is limited to only this, and there is no clear and good way to extend this functionality, unfortunately.
Okay, and then one other was, you mentioned a couple of times production mode only for both of those. Is that just because there's no sense in doing it at dev time, or is there some feature that is used that you must be in production mode to be using it?
For Angular Service Worker, this is a requirement, yes, and really no sense to go for dev. And yep, Service Worker is something to test in production.
Okay, great.
So I have two questions, Matt, if you don't mind.
Yes, please.
So you showed a slide that talked about pre-caching with the Angular Bootstrap.
Mm-hmm.
And that actually either highlighted a misconception that I have, or maybe it just confused me.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought I understood the Angular Bootstrap process, but if you do, you then use the promise API to say then, and then you could do the pre-cache register. When you do a Bootstrap, if it's in production mode, you could still have the Angular CLI compiling all that, right? So that means you still could be delayed by the Angular CLI compiling all your templates and everything else, and then you're gonna run the service worker. So isn't that really too late? I mean, wouldn't you want to run the service worker right after the main assets are sort of downloaded? I'm confused about the ordering here.
So the basic idea is service worker and all progressive ABAP's features are really about progressive enhancement. Really, the later we start with service worker registration is the better. So in the best case, our application should not be affected by this at all, because if we like in the worst case, if for some reason service worker will not be registered at all, our application will not crash, right? But if we will compete with bandwidth or with processor time, it will affect first load experience and next maybe even further. So this is why it really makes sense to register service worker and ask service worker to do its job, what its job, downloading the same assets again after we have application up and running, which is Bootstrap, right?
So when we do something in build mode, right, or in
Mm-hmm.
production mode, we get a bundle and we get a vendor file usually. So I thought the service worker was responsible for caching those and making those instantly available if they're available already in the cache. And then, but if you're already running the application, those have already been used. So there's no point in using the service worker to load those. Do you see my confusion? So does the service worker load and pre-fetch these bundle and vendor bundles and all these other files?
Once service worker, it's all actual for first time load of our application when we actually register service worker. After it's registered, so after browser knows that on this origin, HTTPS mysuperwebsite.com, there is a service worker. After you type this for a second time, service worker will serve the files without any preload of something. So service worker will take control and will so there is no need to wait for Bootstrap of any view.
Okay.
So service worker takes over the second time you go to that URL, not the first time?
Yes. Yes.
Okay,
I mean,
that does it.
first time you register service worker. On next visit, service worker is controlling where to take files from, and if something in cache, it will expose it from there.
Hey, Maxim, I have a couple of questions. I don't know if you can hear me because my Wi-Fi has been in and out a lot, but I have a couple of questions from the people in the chat. We have a couple of beginners, and I'm kind of a beginner with the progressive web apps, so the registering routes was a little bit confusing. I'm hoping that maybe you can explain that a little bit more, and I'm going to put a couple more questions in the chat, in the Hangout chat, so if you can go on there and look. And also, we had a couple of people that joined like kind of later, so I'm hoping that you can, before we end, at the very end, that you can show us that Slack channel one more time.
Oh, yes.
But in the meantime, so I'm putting a couple questions. Can you see the chat in the Google Hangouts? Because I'm just putting a couple questions in there, and then
yes.
we'll do the Slack channel again before.
Yes, let me.
I know it's late there. I don't want to keep you because I know you're super jet lagged, but this is such a good topic.
Let me just type the URL for PWA Slack. Join PWA Slack. I hope something like this. Yes. Registering routes. A bit confusing for beginners. Could you explain a little more? It's different in different libraries, so it's done a bit differently in Angular Service Worker and Workbox. But basically, you define route in some view. For example, in Workbox, you can go for like full match. You can go for regexp, and you can use node-like routing. So if you wish, you can specify not the full URL each time, like API / products, but using some wildcards, some patterns, and some regexp. And for each of this set of resources, you then specify caching strategy. And again, it's different in NGSW and Workbox. In ngHouston, it's super simple. You choose between freshness or performance, which is network first and the cache first. In Workbox, you have a bit more options, and the flow is a bit different. You again specify a strategy and register it against a set of routes. So yeah, I hope I explained this. Next, extent of my knowledge of PWA doesn't express SW Workbox package from Chrome Labs, which ships with Ionic framework. API Maxim then looked similar. Workbox. I'd say that Workbox is a successor of SW Toolbox. It's basically created by the same team of Googlers. Matt Gant and Jeff Posnick are main developers of this library with help of Eddie Osmani. And you are absolutely right. It adopts, say, the best parts from SW Toolbox and SW Precache. So if you are familiar with this tool, moving to SW Workbox will be easy for you. So yeah, this is like logical development of these two libraries. Question number 3, read that HTTPS requirement for service worker. How does it work when we are developing in localhost? Very good question. It just works. So yes, HTTPS is a requirement, but for us, for developers, like inventors of PWA, created this workaround. So if it's localhost, we can we can bypass this HTTPS stuff. So no worries, it will work.
That's awesome. Thank you. Okay, well, can we just do one more quick question, because I know you're tired. One more quick question, and then we'll wrap it up and we'll be done. Okay, so Sean, we have a new viewer that we've never seen before, and he seems pretty cool, and he wants to know how you would handle the service workers only after authentication.
Oh, This is really interesting question, and I'd recommend you to not use service worker for this routes at all. So if something is hidden behind some kind of authentication, I don't think that's it's good match for service worker, just because of security, privacy, and all that stuff. Because just imagine if the main one of the main goals of service workers is to pre-cache data, and it will live in cache storage for a long time. Even after user logged out, it will be still there. So if it's some sensitive information, you could get in troubles. So
all right, well, that's fair enough, and I think that's we'll put a lid on the questions for tonight, because I know it's like 2 o'clock in the morning there, and you just flew home from US. So thank you so much, Maxim. I cannot thank you enough. This was awesome. I really appreciate you staying up so late. I know you're tired, but you were great. I couldn't even tell that you were delirious and jet lagged. You did a great presentation. So again, I put the Slack channel in the I put the Slack channel for the PWA in the chat. I really recommend, if you guys have questions about progressive web apps, that you go. And then Maxim, do you know, would you recommend training? Do you have a blog that you're doing, or would you recommend, is there a good like progressive web apps, maybe video course or blog where somebody can go if they're just kind of trying to figure this out?
There are some good and free code labs on Google website, like developers google.com. You'll find many resources about PWA, including free video courses.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. Thank you so much, and we will talk to you soon. I hope you come back and do another talk for us soon, because you're awesome. And we'll see you.
Yeah, my dream is to visit Houston in person. I've never been there. So let's set it as a goal for next year.
Yeah, if you come to Houston, I'll be so excited. Yeah, that would be great. We would love to have you. And I think, are you going to be at Angular Connect?
Yes.
We'll see you. Sammy and I are going to be there. Sammy and I have never been to, we've never been anywhere outside of the US. This will be our first trip overseas, and we're super excited. So we'll see you there.
Cool.
And we lost Thomas, but Rob, thank you for joining us. And awesome. Rob's kind of been a regular around here. So Rob, we'll see you again soon. And Sean, Khaled, and Vernon, all the people joining us on chat. Dustin is new to ngHouston. So thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll see y'all next week.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Maxim.
Cheers.